Hi everyone, J-Boi here. It's been a while. I hope there are still some of you watching. Drop this video a like to reassemble the old gang because we're going to talk about Doctor Who. There's a new series coming up somehow. Ncuti Gatwa's second and maybe final season as the Doctor. With that on the horizon, there's no better time to take a look back at his first. Okay, maybe a little closer to the release of his first season would have been better, but I've been busy. I'd like to talk about my general thoughts on the series and the issues I have that I hope are less present in season 2. As it says in the title, this is a series I consider to be less than the sum of its parts, and I'd like to dive into why. Let's first summarise my thoughts on each individual episode. I know I made separate videos about all of them at the time, but it's nearly a year on, and some thoughts take more than 24 hours to develop. The Church on Ruby Road was a nice introduction. There were some elements I thought were a little weak, especially towards the climax, but it felt like a good enough start. You know, Millie and Ncuti made good first impressions. I mean, Ncuti wasn't quite this level of firecracker excellence that we saw in The Giggle, but he was good enough. The episode did its job of getting me excited for what was to come, even if, as a standalone story, it doesn't crack my top 5 Christmas specials, and it barely cracks the top 10. And then we had Space Babies, and I know people don't love this one, but honestly, I thought it was a decent first trip for Ruby Sunday. I know there's not a huge amount you can point to and say is great, and there's quite a lot you can point to and say is quite naff. I mean, there's the whole push the button riff that they're kind of referencing, this moment where they pressed the button on the jukebox and the song Push the Button played, and that scene was deleted, so the fact they just keep referencing it as a motif throughout is just nonsense. The big emotional moment of like, oh, this bogeyman, he's alone in the universe, he's a totally unique creature, that's like the Doctor. It's just doing The Beast Below again, but worse, and people don't even love The Beast Below. I quite like The Beast Below, but it feels like, yeah, retreading ground on that sense. But I think the episode is sufficiently fun at a stage where fun is quite an important thing to get right. You know, I think as an introduction to travelling with the Doctor, I think it does what it needs to do in the sense of like, this is great. It's fun to spend time with Ruby and the Doctor. I think they are the highlight of the episode. You can point to them and say that's a great pairing. They're kind of great together. And there's a motorbike going past that you might be hearing. Maybe you're not. I maybe didn't even need to draw attention to it. So yeah, Space Babies, it's not my favourite of the season, but I'm always a little surprised when people bring it up as though it's some sort of low point. Especially because I think The Devil's Chord is worse. I know people generally, I mean, the 2 episodes came out together, people generally, I think, favour the latter, but I don't know, it just, to me, there's so much in it that should work, and that kind of makes it worse that it doesn't, you know. It feels afraid to commit to so many of the ideas it's going for. It's the musical episode with no music or no good music. It's the Beatles episode with no Beatles or no good Beatles. It kind of wants to use them to resolve the crisis by using the genius of Paul McCartney and John Lennon, but also has no interest in telling a Beatles story. And it's kind of like, what are we doing here? And it's got this finale level threat that isn't earned at all beyond just the Doctor going, oh no, this is a finale level threat, and it's like, beyond the bogeyman, it's the first threat we've met of this season, so the Doctor kind of overreacting like that, it's I don't know, it feels too much too soon, and not that I don't like the Maestro. I think they're a pretty interesting villain, and there was so much potential there, and even in what we did get, there is kind of creativity in the, you know, the musical notes appearing in real life and wrapping people up, and that's all good, but it's not good enough. There's not enough of it. It bothers me that it's so close to being great, and you can almost see all the moments where it could have become a great episode, and the fact it falls short of that bothers me, because it really feels messy. It feels, I don't know, just all over the place, and like it falls short of, you know, meeting the potential of the ideas it's bringing up. Like it's not interested in meeting the potential of the ideas it's bringing up. Like it's, you know, there's a big musical number at the end, and Russell's like, oh, you know, the Buffy musical, I was always inspired by that, and it's like, well, do that then. Why would you do an episode that's not that, and then at the end have a musical number that's bad? You know, it's a great kind of choreography, fun moment, but it's not related to the story. It's just a song. Like the episode ends and then there's a song. It's not written by a proper lyricist or songwriter. I don't understand why they didn't kind of proper, you know, do the Buffy thing. The Buffy musical is incredible, and it's such a core episode of that season as like a storytelling device. But in this one, it's kind of like, oh, you know, we did that kind of like the Buffy musical. It's like, no, it's not. I'm talking about Buffy too much. I could talk about it all day. The Maestro doesn't even have the best musical villain number moment of this era. Neil Patrick Harris had it not 2 episodes before, but kind of the day that Devil's Cord came out. The most recent episode was Church on Ruby Road. Then before that was The Giggle. So it felt like 2 episodes ago we had the Toymaker, who's not a musical character, doing, Spice Up Your Life and being this huge, presence. And I think the Maestro is too Toymaker too soon, and the comparison doesn't do the Maestro any favours. Comparing it to Space Babies, I think it's the difference between a good bad episode and a bad good episode. Space Babies should be rubbish, but I quite enjoy it nonetheless, whereas this one feels like it should be great and just isn't, and I'm not even sure it's good. So yeah, I think in a toss-up between the two, I'd take the former. Then we had Boom by Stephen Moffat, which I really liked. Was it just a 12th Doctor story with a new coat of paint? Maybe. Are the 12th Doctor stories the best ones, so it doesn't really matter? Yes. This is a good episode. It's maybe not like a great all-timer episode, I don't see it joining the ranks of Stephen Moffat's best. I was going to say like New Who's best, but New Who's top 5 are all just Stephen Moffat episodes, so I think I don't see it joining that kind of tier, and I'm not quite sure why. I feel like there's a little less to dig into. I feel like I don't have much to say about it, which probably says something, but I did really enjoy it, and I think it's a good premise that is well executed, and so maybe not 5 big booms, but I'm happy to give it 4 big booms. Boom, boom, is that what they do? Boom. AJ and Big Justice, I'm less fussed about. The Rizzler is where it's at. 73 Yards is another banger. I really do enjoy this one. I think it's got a really effective horror atmosphere, and it's consistently making smart choices to create and maintain that level of atmosphere. I think it's great to have a Dr. Light story that allows the companion to step into the spotlight so much, and I think Millie Gibson really rises to the acting challenge that this episode presents. I love the build-up of dread throughout the episode as it kind of infects every aspect of Ruby's life, and then you get a kind of brief moment of relief with Kate and Unit, and it kind of maybe feels like things are going to be okay, and then that is ruined as well, and I think, it just kind of, it's good at building hope and dashing hope, and I think it's just a great way of just depicting this total isolation. I think the political aspect that comes in towards the end maybe could have had a little bit more depth. I don't know, I think Russell T Davies is someone that, in interviews and things, he's so specific about his kind of political feelings and his anger, and I think to then have him in an episode of Doctor Who present this evil politician, and it's like, okay, what kind of angles are you going to go for this fascist? What point is he going to make? And he creates this guy, Roger Ap Gwilliam, who's just like, I love nukes and I'm going to use nuclear bombs to nuke everyone. It's like a child's idea of what an evil politician is, coming from a man who, usually gets very specific about what an evil politician is. That's a little bit disappointing, but also I think, a bit more depth, but maybe a little bit depth that isn't just, so he's a kind of cartoonish villain who likes nuclear bombs, and also he's a rapist. I feel like that just tonally is messed up, and it's like, okay, you could do a kind of dark story here, or you can just have him be a nonsense kind of caricature of an evil politician. I don't like both, but I think that side of the story and the way Ruby kind of uses it, I think it's nice to have that little moment of triumph in amongst the kind of total abandonment. I like that she finds something to do that is, she saves the world, and she's someone who, hasn't been companion for very long at that point, and then she's just abandoned by the Doctor. But I think it's kind of a powerful episode, and I think the lack of answers of kind of quite the logistics of everything, and what does the woman say to make people run away, that doesn't bother me. I think I like the idea that it's this kind of mystical cycle that doesn't really kind of make sense beyond the emotional experience of that. I think that's an example of kind of storytelling without answers and explanations that works in this season. I work in a cinema. I've been checking the screens, and there's this film, The Woman in the Yard. Has anyone seen that? It kind of feels a little bit like 73 Yards. It's got yard in the title. There's this woman that they see. I've only seen like a bit in the 20-minute mark and a bit towards the end. But spoiler alert for that film that no one's watching. It kind of feels like it has the same ending. I saw a scene where the woman she becomes the woman in the yard, and I was like, come on now. Russell's done this. He did it last year. Let me know in the comments if you've seen Woman in the Yard and 73 Yards and whether they're the same thing. So yeah, 73 Yards I think is kind of a Russell T Davies all-timer. I think it's one of his strongest scripts. It's one of the best executions of one of his scripts. When the episode aired, I thought it was my favourite, and I thought, by the end of the series, I would have had 73 Yards at the top of the list. I feel like now that's not true, and it's not the fault of 73 Yards. It's that another episode has stuck with me just a little bit more, and that's Dot and Bubble. I think it's the one I've thought about the most. I think there's this great subversive idea in its centre of making a Doctor Light episode where we follow this character that isn't the Doctor, and making them someone who really sucks. And I know that, maybe Elton is a bit questionable at times, but I think Lindy Pepperbean, if that is her name, I don't think I made that up. It's Lindy that I'm questioning. Pepperbean has stayed in there. I think she is someone who she feels like she's about to go on this fairly predictable but fairly satisfying arc of she's stuck in the programming, she's restrained by technology, but she's going to rise up above that. She's going to save the day, become a hero, the unlikely hero of Fine Time, and I think the fact that it then pulls the rug out from underneath you when you're expecting that arc is fantastic. Whether that's the moment that she kills what's he called, Ricky September, or the moment that it's kind of explicitly revealed that that whole society is built on kind of bigotry and racism. It's kind of a rug pull that happens at different points depending on how perceptive you are. It's either a kind of immediate, something's not right with this society beyond the obvious, or it's a gradual, hang on, they've said some things a couple times there that I'm not too keen on, or you're totally oblivious until the end and you go, what, hang on, that came out of nowhere, and then you go, oh, actually, no, she said this, she said that, they've all been awful towards the Doctor and less awful to Ruby. Oh, okay, I think it's a really kind of horrendous moment that I think works no matter when you realise it. It's kind of that thing of if you realise it later on, you then feel stupid and you look back and it's really effective at that point. If it's a gradual thing, then that's a really great slow burn kind of unsettled to kind of horrified moment. As a Doctor Light story, I love the use of the Doctor and Ruby throughout. I think they're kind of used very well, and it's a fun way to include them, but also that moment at the end where you actually see the Doctor and he has his big moment. I think of all Ncuti Gatwa's big moments, that's the one that hits the hardest. That's the one that he nails the best. I think this just agonizing disbelief that the color of his skin, the new color of his new skin, is that much of a barrier that it stops him doing the thing that the Doctor does. He's not able to save these people. These people won't let themselves be saved by the Doctor because of the reality of their bigoted society. And I think Ncuti and Millie as well really sell that moment. I think she feels ridiculous to focus on her in that, and I think I said that in my other video, but she is so clearly hurt and disgusted by this as well in a really nice subtle way. And no, I think the episode's really great, and it's the one I've thought about the most since the episode aired. So yeah, great stuff, horrifying, great on the initial watch, and I think more horrifying on the rewatch, more effective over time. And yeah, no, I think this is Russell's best script of the season. And that and what's the good one called? Wild Blue Yonder. Those two are he's still got it, some of it. He's still got something. Rogue somehow felt really fresh in its pure distilled, this is an episode of Doctor Who-ness. I think in amongst all the genre bending and the kind of formula subversions, we had this episode that was, the Doctor and Ruby show up in a fun historical setting and deal with the monster of the week. It was somehow that kind of predictable Doctor Who setup has become novel in this series, and I have thoughts about whether that's a good thing or not, but I think for the sake of that episode, I really enjoyed it, and I may be doing it a disservice to boil it down to just that, but I think, we had Indira Varma, she was the bird woman, the bird designs were really fun, they were ridiculous, and I like the kind of ridiculous flamboyance of that in amongst this historical period with that level of kind of similar human flamboyance, and I think that was all fun and good. We had Jonathan Groff as the titular rogue, and I think him and Ncuti Gatwa were a really fun pairing, and I liked this side of the 15th Doctor, that he was kind of thrown off his game by his attraction to Rogue. You know, he was kind of, you know, his usual Doctor thing wasn't working because he was distracted by the fact Jonathan Groff is incredibly dreamy. And I think not only was that a fun pairing, but they were able to get a lot more depth and a lot more emotion from it than I was necessarily expecting from a kind of one-off, you know, little bantery dynamic. So I'd love to see Rogue again. I'd love to see more from these two wonderfully non-Russell T Davies writers. You know, this is the only time this season that an episode wasn't written by either the showrunner or a showrunner. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a testament to the fact that we need fresh voices on this show, and I'm glad we had them for the sake of this episode. Sometimes I see people say that The Legend of Ruby Sunday was really good and it was let down by its second part, and I can't get behind that at all. I think it's a rubbish, nonsense, nothing story that treads water for so long so that it can keep the reveal as the cliffhanger, you know, and the reveal is kind of when the stuff starts unfolding. So, you know, to hold back on that for the sake of a part one and part two, it doesn't work. And I said in my video on it that it was kind of half a story, and everyone was like, that's always what they are, you know, it's always only partially telling the story. I don't think they're ever as egregious as this. You know, you look at Army of Ghosts, Bad Wolf, World Enough in Time, Utopia, they're doing things in their own right, you know, they are telling the stories. In a lot of those cases, you know, people say the first one's the best one, they say it's good, and to kind of say that, oh no, nothing ever happens in part one is ridiculous. You know, I think you really lose a lot by moving all of the stuff of significance into part two, and I, you know, what can you point to in The Legend of Ruby Sunday as an identity beyond the time window sequence, which I do think is good. I think that works. But I don't know, there's not even a reason for any of this to be happening. There's not an inciting incident. They're not like, you know, you drop in on the Doctor and Ruby exploring space and suddenly they've met one too many Susan twists and they're like, oh, you know what, we've got to deal with this. This is outrageous. There's not a moment where Ruby's snow comes into play so importantly that they really have a job to do and they need to solve it because it's becoming a problem. It's just like, right, hello, the Doctor and Ruby here. We're going to do the finale now. It's time to wrap this all up. You know, the arcs aren't related to one another. They just kind of, it's like, right, we've got this to deal with and we've got this to deal with, the 2 season arcs, right? How can you help us with that? It's nothing, you know. Yeah, I don't know. The reveal is nothing, you know, because it literally has the moment of like Sutek, you know, there's no discussion of what that means, there's no anything, and it means that the second half of the story has to do too much, and it has to cram everything together, and it just, I don't know. It's even funny that there's a better cliffhanger point in the next episode. If you end everything when the world's been destroyed and the Doctor's looking out, then you can get on with the actual ramifications of that in part two. You know, start part two with him wandering the wasteland. But because they're so desperate to have Sutek be the, oh my god, you know, I'm going to text everyone, I'm going to tweet that Sutek's back, oh my god, then they waste all the time for The Legend of Ruby Sunday. I think both episodes are bad. The first part probably bothers me more, especially, and I'm really petty when it comes to this, especially because everyone was telling me, no, this is normal for part ones. It's like, I've seen the show. This is not normal for part ones. You know, usually part ones have more to offer than, or often they have more to offer than part two, but usually they have more to offer than just one decent sequence where the whole room becomes a VHS tape, which I did really like, you know. Oh, and there's one bit where the Doctor goes,
do you dream about being an ambulance?
And that is probably my favourite line of the season. That's so Doctor Who, so ridiculous. But yeah, a brief moment of hilarity in amongst, you know, just nothing. Then we have Empire of Death, which is just dreck. It is just among the worst episodes of, you know, as a two-part finale, it's among the worst we've had since the revival. I think every scene in it, except the one with the spoon woman in the wasteland, I like that. Everything else ranges from, you know, forgettable to kind of outright appalling. And I don't tend to be this hyperbolically negative about things on this channel, but that it just really bothers me. There's so little going on. It feels like it's been chopped up to pieces in the edit, but the original script was never good anyway. It's like, oh, they've ruined a bad script with a bad edit. It feels like there's stuff missing. It feels like there's stuff, there's too much going on. There's not enough going on. There's awful character arc resolutions that are kind of laughably, devoid of the emotion that they're trying to go for. I think, I don't know, it's an episode so bad that it can trick you into thinking that the whole season you just watched was that bad. It can kind of leave such a bad taste in your mouth that you're just like, oh God, yeah. What a waste of time that season was, and maybe there's an extent to which that becomes true when the end of it is so poor. Because yeah, by pure maths, it's a good season. There is more good than bad, and there's quite a decent amount of great. That run from Boom to Rogue is one of the best 4-episode runs I think we've ever had, if not the best. So yeah, as a sequence of episodes, season 1 is a triumph, but as a series of television, as a kind of complete experience from start to finish, that's where I'm a lot less sure. It doesn't feel very cohesive as a bit of storytelling. There's this random offhand 6-month gap apparently between Space Babies and the Devil's Chords. There's the Doctor saying, as a father to father, and then later on saying, oh no, I have a granddaughter but I don't have children yet. It kind of feels like that it's kind of in conflict with itself. There are 2 series arcs that don't have anything to do with one another that the Doctor decides to mush into one finale totally arbitrarily, and as kind of the overarching kind of emotional narrative goes, it feels like we're just started with Ruby and then she's gone. The companion exit is this awful dull note to end on, because it falls flatter emotionally than any beat outside of the Chibnall era, and so you look at what you actually have as a story, and that's where the cracks start forming. And it's a shame because both arcs are pretty good, or at least feel like they might be. Ruby's memory, the stuff with her mum and the mystery of that coming through into other episodes via the visual of Snow appearing, in a spaceship, in a wherever. I think, when it happens first in Space Babies, I think it's beautiful, and it's so rare to see a moment like that, and storytelling so important in Doctor Who being done visually, being done with kind of filmmaking, cinematography techniques rather than just like script, pure stuff happening kind of thing. And I think, when that arc escalates and we go kind of into the time window and we're properly digging into that, that's great as well. The visual of this kind of, memory being presented around us, and it's hazy because it's kind of a CCTV footage that you're standing and walking around in. And then the idea of that changing in real time, you're watching this loop of footage that then seems to come to life. That is wonderful as well. And Susan Twist as an arc, that's great too. I really enjoyed seeing her pop up week to week, and I think it works as it's a series arc in the social media age, because they know people are going to figure it out, and they're going to have it pointed out to them if they haven't spotted it, and it's that great kind of discussion of what do you think's going on here, and she as a presence, as an actor, is really great, and I get more from those episodes where she has a little bit more to do. I think she's better in Boom, when she's the ambulance, and in 73 Yards, I think she plays a really lovely role at the very start of that as this wonderfully normal presence that is corrupted by this entity. So it's a real shame, just a genuine major disappointment, that both of these arcs amount to nothing or less than nothing. Susan Twist, all of that just in service of her being, a trap for the Doctor. A kind of, because she's called Susan, the Doctor's going to think it's his granddaughter for no reason, and I don't know, that, S triad, TARDIS, it's an anagram, it's not really an anagram, it's, it's Sue-Tech, Susan Triad Technologies. I really don't know what they're doing, and it kind of amounts to such a, bum note. It's such a, I don't know, it's annoying me to think about, because it feels like you could be doing so much with this. She just becomes, this actress that has proved herself throughout the series, just becomes this faceless, personalityless vessel for the big CGI dog, but not even the vessel for this big CGI dog, because we have Harriet Arbinger in that finale that has way too much going on. So it kind of, to totally strip that character of anything is such a disappointment. And then we have Ruby Sunday's origin, which is revealed to be totally normal, and all this stuff just happened for the sake of it, because it's important, because we assign importance to it. And it's all the fault of The Last Jedi, a film I absolutely love, that the world is intent on punishing me for loving. I've got to be careful about how I criticize this reveal, because I sound like someone complaining about Rey being a nobody. And you know, Russell's spoken about, Russell, we're on first name terms, Davis has spoken about how he he liked the Rey nobody twist, and then was annoyed that they kind of went back and made her someone important. And I like the Rey nobody twist. I like what it does. Star Wars is a universe where importance can spring up out of nowhere. You know, people can just have magic powers. People can just be special, and to kind of as an audience go, oh, who is she? Who's she related to? Where does this power come from? That expectation of lineage was silly, and you know, to subvert that and say, no, she's nobody, she's her own character, she's her own person, you've come from nothing. Not only does it do that on an audience level, it shattered her expectations of her place in the story. She felt like once she knew where she belonged, everything would click, and she would be okay, and she would be comfortable in her power and in her role in the galaxy. And to take that away from her was a kind of, for her, a shattering moment, and for us, a kind of surprising moment. And, you know, it doesn't, by saying she's nobody, it doesn't also say, oh, and, you know, you're also not special or magic. She's still special in magic. Whereas Ruby, to say she's nobody and that her mum was nobody, and that all that stuff that happened was actually totally normal, and the dramatic pointing was pointing at a road sign to name her, something that they didn't realise, but also they named her that anyway, that it misses the point of why The Last Jedi works, and, you know, just kind of does it for the sake of it. It's doing things for the sake of it, and I don't like it at all. Adding that kind of audience blaming, ha, you thought she was special, aren't you silly, kind of thing, to a season that spends the whole time going, wow, her specialness levels are off the charts, where does this come from? It just feels off. It feels smug. Unfortunately, smug is the vibe that RTD has been radiating quite a lot in his writing, in his kind of talking about the series, and in how he responds to criticism. I get the sense that because so much of what's thrown his way and thrown towards the show is in bad faith, he kind of feels that because of that he can do no wrong. That because some people are stupid and their criticisms are rubbish, he knows better, he always knows better, and that it's ridiculous to have any notion that some of the things he's doing don't work. Because it's true that there are some people out there who are saying, oh, you know, this movement into fantasy and magic and all that, that's not my Doctor Who, that's not what I think Doctor Who should be, and they've got this kind of narrow idea of the show. Because they're wrong, then the people saying, oh, it kind of feels like you're half-arsing a lot of this and kind of throwing things out without much of an explanation or exploration into what's actually happening here. They're wrong as well, you know. Or because some people are saying, you know, the Doctor should never show emotion, he's a man. Because some people are saying that, you know, all this woke nonsense making the main male character cry all the time, because that's absurd. Then the people saying, yeah, but also having the Doctor cry every week, even at minor things, maybe devalues some of the bigger emotional moments, because it's the same emotional reaction we had for the Bogeyman, you know? It's kind of, or because there are some people that get so lost in the details, so lost in kind of wanting lore to be consistent and to want explanations for everything, that they lose sight of the bigger emotional picture. That's the kind of people I'm really bothered by in all walks of life, all storytelling fandoms, kind of movie criticism. The people that, you know, cinema sins, they go, oh, what about this, what about that, what about that, and they just kind of totally lose sight of what matters. Because they exist, then no answers are ever necessary, no explanations are ever helpful, no details are ever important. And I think, I don't know, it's this kind of, I don't know, overcorrection, or this kind of, because so many of my critics are stupid morons, I'm therefore always right. That's the sense I get, and it's a shame, because he's right that so many of his critics are awful morons that don't get it. But it's a shame because there are times where I'm not sure he gets it, but he's been given that confidence to keep getting it wrong. It's a shame Ruby's overall story is so tied to that arc that amounts to nothing, because I think she's a fun presence in these episodes. She's fun and good, and in a few key moments, Millie Gibson has kind of showcased the acting chops that have been demanded of her, and she's done really well. But you kind of look at this character over 9 episodes, and I don't see much from her. I don't know much about who she is beyond just a fun person to hang out with. What does she get from traveling with the Doctor beyond just a good bestie? It feels like so much of her time was wasted on this stuff, and then there's this awful companion exit, this just absolute pants, rushed out of nowhere, just really falls flat. I don't want to get too much into pretending I know what's going on behind the scenes because, sometimes you go viral with kind of faux behind the scenes knowledge that turns out to be complete nonsense. But I think you can tell that there are reasons, there are things shaping the end of the season that are maybe beyond creative. Whatever happened with Millie Gibson and Russell T Davies and kind of her job on the show and her kind of plans for season 2, whatever happened there, it doesn't feel like that was always the plan. I think that's as kind of non-committal speculation as I can get. But it just feels like something shifted, and then it's suddenly like, oh, and she's leaving, and it's like, oh, didn't she just get here? Hasn't she had like 4 normal adventures and then just kind of the worst time ever? I mean, maybe that's why you leave, but they didn't build that into the story. It's kind of, I don't know, it's Martha Jones with no conflict. So yeah, as a series of the show, I don't know what it's trying to do or what it's trying to say, and frankly, I get the sense that it's not trying to do or say anything at all. And that may just be because so many of the episodes are written by people that have said it all before. We've only got Rogue as this example of someone, episode written by people who haven't run the show. So I think maybe it's just that the stuff that it is saying isn't registering as anything new because it's not new. Maybe it comes from the fact that 8 episodes plus a special just isn't enough time. There's not enough room to settle into the ideas of this season and these characters and what it's trying to do or say. It feels like you kind of spend a bit of time just, building up and getting settled. You kind of run with that for a bit and then suddenly you have to start the finale. I remember after Rogue thinking, oh my God, I've enjoyed the last few weeks, but to now just be drawing that to an end, I didn't even know at the time that it was going to be a bad end. It just felt like a premature end. And I don't know, it feels like because of that, it's a shame because you've got the 2 weakest episodes, the 4 weakest episodes, 2 at the start, 2 at the end. The gold in the middle is bookended by the weakest stuff that the series has to offer. And that feels like a real shame, because it kind of feels like, I don't know, there's great stuff to be found, but you have to kind of dig deep to get it. You have to get past 2 episodes that aren't great, and then you get to it, and it's like, okay, good, great. This is Doctor Who, this is, we're cooking with gas here. And then it gives you 2 episodes that are so bad that you come out the other side going, oh, what a slog that was. The start and the end are unsurprisingly so important, and I think getting them wrong gives a much worse impression than something that starts really well and then maybe slightly dips in the middle and then ends well as well. I think, to have a great opening that you can go, great, this show's brilliant, everyone should check this out. And then, maybe, once you're on board, it takes you on a journey that you're not as fussed about, but it comes out the other side and you're left with this great impression and you want to watch more, but I think, I don't know, the current thing that we have is, you push through those first 2, it's great. Oh God, what have I just watched? I guess if this is a review of the whole season, I should talk about some other reviewy specifics. Visuals, I think it mostly looks pretty good. I don't necessarily feel like there's this big step up, like this budget's increased, Disney's on board. But, I think the VFX and the visuals kind of range from serviceable to pretty impressive, which I guess is a nice thing to have. have. There's no moment of like, oh my god, what am I looking at kind of thing. Maybe you'd feel the increased budget a little more, if there even is much of an increased budget, if kind of the direction was better to support that. I think maybe, it's this big sci-fi VFX heavy show. The direction is very TV. It's very flat. There are a couple of instances when Dylan Holmes Williams takes over. He did 73 Yards and Dot and Bubble. And that's a moment where you're just like, oh, hang on, someone's cooked here. This is really good. This is exciting to watch, and it's doing stuff with the camera and with the blocking that is actually bringing an energy to the scenes that goes beyond just the kind of performances and the writing. So it would be nice to have a little bit more of that going forward. That kind of someone coming along whose impact on the show is actually felt. Like Rachel Talalay was to the 12th Doctor era. Just that kind of, oh, okay, oh, this is good. Not that anything kind of in the other episodes is totally egregious, but I think, maybe going from the 60th specials to Church on Ruby Road, you do feel a step down, I think, in the direction. The music, I think, was a little disappointing this time round. I don't know, I think it might be because Murray Gold just hasn't released it. I've not had the chance to soak up all the great work that he's been doing, but very little has stuck with me beyond the 15th Doctor's theme. And I feel like maybe in a better season I would have been able to go, oh, that musical moment was incredible, that musical moment. I think it works well, to sell some of the key moments with music, but I think as kind of individual compositions go, there's very little to jump out at me this time round. Ruby's theme is good. I think, again, maybe it's not used enough. We're not quite getting enough time with these themes and these characters, but maybe I can't blame Murray Gold for that. So while overall I am positive towards Series 14, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, pretty good. People ask me, oh, do you like the new one? It's like, yeah, I do. Yeah. At the same time, I am incredibly disappointed by it. I look at so much about it and I think that should be special. This should be a special entry into the catalogue of Doctor Who series, and it just isn't. It isn't that. It is, all of its parts are great, but the sum is less. It is. I'm just, I found the best phrase for it, and I'm trying to paraphrase. It is less than the sum of its parts, and I think it's a little bit like that Devil's Cord Space Babies thing. It's kind of a bad good series. It should be special, and it just kind of isn't. Now, I just called it Series 14, and that's actually wrong. It's technically Season 1. It is apparently the start of this brand new Disney Plus era. And I'm not against a fresh start. I'm not against having a kind of, right, here's the new Season 1, Episode 1. I think it's something the show has needed for a while. I'm not like, sticking to Series 14 as a kind of, I'm never going to call it this fake name. I'm fine with it being Season 1, but I think with that, I have to look at this slightly differently and say, how does it work as a Season 1? And I'm not sure it does. I don't know if there's enough here to sell a new audience member on the show to kind of convince them of the kind of worth of the show's premise. And that's partially because this season is so rarely doing the show's premise. Companion introduction episodes aren't really doing the Doctor Who format. They're kind of getting everything into place so that the show can later on do the Doctor Who format. And, that they're necessary and they're often very good, but like you can't point to Church on Ruby Road and say, oh, that's your typical Doctor Who episode. And I think the same can be said for like first trips. I think maybe it's a little bit more of a taster of your standard Doctor Who episode, but it's still, there are so many firsts going on that it's not, you're dropped into this adventure and you've got everything to do. That the focus on it being the first trip often kind of overrides the trip itself. I'm thinking of like End of the World and episodes such as that. I'm not ready to list because I've not given it enough thought. But that kind of thing, it's The Beast Below. It's almost less about the thing that they do and more about the fact it's the first time they're doing that thing. And then the finale comes along and I think it is another break to normality. It takes a foundation of what you kind of expect from an episode and then it raises the stakes somehow or changes the circumstances somehow. And then we've got episodes that are exciting changes to the formula of the show. Episodes in this season like 73 Yards, Dot and Bubble, and Boom to an extent. I think these are all great episodes, but I think you kind of the subversion of what we expect from a Doctor Who episode, that loses a bit of power when episodes like that outnumber normal episodes of Doctor Who. It kind of feels like they're the norm now, and then just your standard adventure, that's something, I said Rogue, it felt novel, it felt fresh, because it was just doing the Doctor Who thing. And I think these things work better if you're looking at a Series 14, if you're looking at, a show that's existed in this form for 20 years, and it's finding ways to reinvent itself, to keep fresh, to kind of play with its formula, play with expectations, do interesting things with what we've come to know as your typical episode of Doctor Who. But I think if it's a season 1, then it's more of a problem that you've got, a real absence of standard Doctor Who episodes. I mean, if you talk about episodes that are just, your typical, they land at a place, there's a villain of that week, and they have to sort something out, then it's only really Space Babies, Devil's Cord, Boom, and Rogue. And even then, I'd say most of those have kind of caveats that stop them being, a great example of a standard Doctor Who episode. It's really only Rogue that you can point to and say, yeah, that's Doctor Who. So I guess, kind of to put it in a way that makes me sound like the kind of person I tend to disagree with, my idea of what Doctor Who is, my idea of what Doctor Who should be, is not conveyed very well to a potential new audience member. But maybe, this is a new version of Doctor Who, and they don't need to convey what I think Doctor Who should be. But I think, considering the general gist of this season, it doesn't feel new enough that this kind of departure from the status quo is kind of making a point. It just feels like everyone wanted to do something fun and quirky with it, and there's so few episodes that that actually ended up fully dominating the series. So I don't think it's a pointed thing. I don't think it's we're showing a new side of the show. It feels like we're attempting to show mostly the same side of the show, but with some kind of some variation. It's just that they didn't really look at the numbers, and it's just mostly variation. And one thing a season like this has to get right, and not just a season 1, episode 1, but the first season of a new incarnation, is to sell the audience on this Doctor. And if it's a season 1, episode 1, on the Doctor as a character. And I don't know how well that's been achieved here. I mean, I really, really like Ncuti Gatwa as a presence in these episodes. I think he's a good enough actor that he's always able to elevate the material to a certain degree. Like, he's making interesting enough acting choices that he doesn't just say the lines as they're written. He's kind of, it seems like he's thinking about how to say it in a way that is interesting, whether that's through cadence or through kind of tone. And I think that's something that sets him apart from Jodie Whittaker, unfortunately. I think she was very much going for exactly as the script said a lot of the time, but so I think in that sense it's a step up from what we've had, but I do think the material isn't good enough to meet him. He's kind of elevating the material to a certain degree, but the material is kind of falling short for him. I think in the moment-to-moment interactions, like just moving through the episode, he's great. I think he's really compelling to watch, and you're kind of, fully sucked into that performance. But I think when it's kind of required big moments, big doctor-y moments, I am the Doctor and I'm saving the day, that's the kind of thing that this Doctor hasn't quite delivered on. I feel like he should have it in him. Like, there's nothing about the performance that tells me it's beyond him, but I think in the moments that it's demanded it, I have to blame the scripts, I think, because I don't think the combination of the performance and the scripts has been able to elevate this Doctor to the status that it feels like he should deserve. And the conclusion that I've come to over the last year is that I'm not sure Russell T Davies has much of a take on the character. And I think that's, my instinct there is that that's ridiculous. Like, he wrote the Doctor very well for 5 series, and, made the character so popular, brought this show back. And obviously you have to get the Doctor to do that. But you kind of look at that period of the show, and it's a very unique period of the show. It's kind of right in the shadow of the Time War, of a big gap. The Doctor as a character is grappling with all this guilt, survivor's guilt, and also just I murdered everyone guilt. And that defines his characterization so much. It's such a dominant force, and it should be. It's such an important part of the show, and, you couldn't do that era without it. But I think you attempt to take away the Time War from Russell's characterization of the Doctor, and it's like, what are you left with, really? What kind of more is there for him to add? And, I think, obviously the Time War is a big thing to go through. but you can move past it. Like, I think you could, from 2010 onwards, they were able to kind of move past the loss of Gallifrey and the Time Lords without kind of making it seem like it didn't matter. Like, there was still this weight held to it, there was still this whatever, but it wasn't the only thing going on with the character. And obviously Chibnall destroyed Gallifrey again, so we are kind of back to square one, but it's a less interesting square one. So I understand that there's kind of multiple kind of factors at play here that have kind of kept us where we are. But yeah, my thought is, take away the Time War, what does Russell have to say? But also, can Russell take away the Time War? That's the question I'm thinking, because sometimes it feels like it's still 2005. Sometimes it feels like that's still the thing that's driving this character again. And I know it's not the Time War, it's just the loss of, Gallifrey from the Chibnall era, but it feels wrong. It feels like, I don't know, Bi-Generation happened in The Giggle, and it split the Doctor in two, and David Tennant's character was given this rest and this recuperation, and then we had this kind of firebolt of a character in Ncuti Gatwa's 15. He was healed, he was healthy, he was older, he was wiser, he was guiding this younger version of the Doctor, this weaker version of the Doctor, to gain to have the rest and the recovery that he needed, and it kind of felt like that was a moment of, okay, we're putting the trauma of New Who to bed. We're not necessarily abandoning it, but we're not letting it define us anymore. And from then on, we're going forward into this show with this newfound life, this newfound kind of closure, I guess, and obviously the opportunity to make more trauma down the line. But I think it felt like that's where we were, and it felt like that was the point of Bi-Generation. So to then, alarm bells were set off in the church on Ruby Road, because at first you meet the Doctor, and it says in the script just how, like, he's dancing in the club, Ruby sees him, and he just looks so alive, and it's like, okay, great, this is the new Doctor, this is Bi-Generated, New Who is behind him, this is season 1, episode 1, and he's dancing, and it's great. And then it doesn't take long for him to just start feeling like Russell T Davies on autopilot at times. He's, they're having a great time, and then it's, I'm alone in the universe, I've got no one, I'm the last of my kind. It's like, oh, are we doing this again? Like, he's still Christopher Eccleston 20 years later. And I know there's this real world element that they occasionally allude to wanting to weave in about Ncuti Gatwa being a survivor of a genocide in real life, and him bringing that to the character, but it feels like they're not actually looking at that in any meaningful way. They're just running on the fumes of 2005, and I don't know, it feels like we're about to see a new side of the character, and we've just kind of reverted to Russell T Davies's default status quo version of the Doctor, which is, I'm the oncoming storm, I'm the last of my kind, I'm the survivor of the Time War, I'm survivor of Chibnall destroying Gallifrey, I'm the survivor of the Flux. It just feels like that's what Russell can do, is just default to, he's this kind of traumatized man. Because maybe what you need in a season 1 is just a general version of the Doctor. He's just like a happy, fun, weird guy with a bit of darkness to him, and you allude to that darkness, but maybe you kind of let him be this palatable figure. But I think, compare how this season 1 deals with the character compared to how series 1 dealt with it with the 9th Doctor in 2005, and there was just so much more depth to the 9th Doctor, and so much more of an interrogation of that depth, so much more of a kind of exploration of what it meant to have a character like this. And I don't know, I don't necessarily think that Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor should be as dark and as traumatized as Christopher Eccleston and going into that trauma, but I think in the absence of that sort of depth, we need something in its place, and we don't. We have allusions to it, and we have allusions to XYZ, but there's no kind of hook beyond that, and I think that's a problem. I think it's especially frustrating because this era has shown that he can work perfectly. He can kind of just be a fully well-rounded version of this character. To be honest, I felt in The Giggle, although it was just a taster of him, and he was kind of a supporting role rather than a kind of fully well-rounded protagonist, he felt fully formed. He felt like a complete version of that character there. But the other two times he's really clicked for me is, unfortunately and predictably, when Mr. Stephen Moffat took over. I think, I've said before that Boom, and I'm not the first to say it, Boom did kind of just feel at times like you're just watching an episode with the Doctor and Clara, which on the one hand is like great, and on the other is a bit kind of come on now. But I can't deny that kind of seeing Ncuti spout this Moffat dialogue, this beautiful Moffat prose, makes me go, that's Doctor Who. That's Doctor Who right there. Which is maybe a bit bad because I'm kind of holding him up to another standard. But I think that Moffat has so much to say about the Doctor. He can't help himself. He can't help but interrogate who the Doctor is and why we should care. Moffat pours so much of himself into the Doctor. I think you can see, Matt Smith to a certain degree, but obviously Capaldi is this man who is, Scottish and the cleverest man in the room, and no one quite can get on his level, and he's clearly on the spectrum, and I think you can trace so much of Moffat through that. But then it's not just, the Doctor is me and I am great, it's the Doctor is me and I suck. The script pulling this character apart and just going, who the hell do you think you are? It's his self-loathing and his kind of arrogance combined to bring such incredible characterization. Even in his weaker script, always feels like he has something to say, either with the stories or with, just his dealing with the character. And Russell T Davies has not shown that level of kind of constant assessment of his primary character. Joy to the World, the most recent Christmas special, just sealed the deal for me that Stephen Moffat was the one who should be writing this character. I think it's Ncuti's best episode, and I don't mean that it's the best of his era, but I think for him and as the Doctor, it's the best he's been. I think he's it doesn't feel like he's saying lines written for another Doctor. It feels like he is 15, but he's this kind of perfectly, fully realised version of 15 where all his quirks and his emotion and his depth and his kind of, all the shootiness that is brought just clicks together. It melds together to be this kind of really fantastic incarnation. And I think if that was how I saw the character throughout all of season 1, then I would probably have a very different opinion on season 1. And I think, I already like that Doctor, and I already like that season, I guess, mostly. But I think to have this character be not quite there for a lot of it is so frustrating, because when he's there, you're like, oh my god, this could be like, all-timer Doctor. This could be kind of up in the top 3, there's all the ingredients to make him kind of a top 1 Doctor. And I think, Joy to the World, I've got kind of mixed feelings on it overall, but mostly positive because of how well the Doctor worked for me. I would have loved to make a proper video on it. I was out of the country and then moving across this country, and I never got a chance to properly sink my teeth into it. But I think my big takeaway was that I wish Stephen Moffat was writing more this era or running this era, because, and it still suffers from some of the same things, some of the kind of retreading of ground. The Doctor staying in one place and settling down isn't as revolutionary as they're pretending, because we keep getting it, and it's like, Doctor, you keep running from place to place, you've never slowed down. And then every now and then he does slow down, and they say that to him, and then it repeats next time. And it's funny, we had Trenzalore, we had By Generation, we had, now he spends a year in this hotel, but that sequence is the best part of that episode, so you can't mind. It's like, these are reheated nachos, but they still taste delicious. And yeah, no, all that stuff with Anita was wonderful. Kind of everything about that episode except Joy herself. It felt like, Russell T Davies had started writing that episode, and then Stephen Moffat took over, and it felt like Moffat gravitated towards different things, because obviously he's a different writer, but we were stuck with Joy as a feature. But no, I didn't have much interest in her, but I didn't feel like the episode did as well. But I think I enjoyed that episode for a number of reasons, but, mostly because of how well the Doctor clicked. And it gave me hope that maybe, this wasn't just a byproduct of Stephen Moffat taking over, that also there was this element that now he has it, Ncuti has it, the show has this version of 15 that we can take into season 2, and kind of build on, and this is where he is now, and it's not that we're going to go back to how he is in Church on Ruby Road. I hope that's true. I'm not sure it will be, but it would be really great if we could just keep this ball rolling. The Doctor is this now, and he's fantastic. And okay, if that is a fool's hope that everyone will be able to write this character as well as Moffat did, then at least what Joy to the World did was make it so the most recent episode of Doctor Who didn't make me totally miserable about the state of the show. It kind of washed away that taste of Empire of Death. It's not a perfect episode, but it's a much better episode to leave, my idea of the show on than that Sutekh finale. I think I was really able to look forward to season 2 after that special, because it felt like, oh, you know what, this is good. I remember I like this show, which is a useful thing to have after that dreadful finale. And I think, I'm glad I've had this opportunity now to talk about that, because, it did wonders for my general feelings on Doctor Who. And I think that episode helps as like a clean break from season 1. Now I don't feel like I'm still in that era. It feels like that's a thing that happened last year. It feels like I can now look at season 1 as a whole. I'm no longer stuck in that awful Sutekh finale. I can just look at how do I feel about the whole thing. And I think maybe that's why it's taken me so long to get my thoughts out. That and just being incredibly busy. But I think, I enjoyed Joy to the World. I enjoyed season 1 with some pretty major caveats. So there we are. I think I'm done now. I know I sort of came to one conclusion and then started a brand new point and then started talking about an episode I've never spoken about on this channel before, but I just wanted to make sure we were all caught up before going into season 2, and I feel satisfied that I've got my thoughts on all this out there before we start the next season this Saturday, which is just baffling to me that we're here already. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of rambling roundup. Let me know in the comments what you thought about Season 1 and what your hopes are for Season 2. Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking about this show again. I'm sorry I've taken so long away from this channel. I didn't plan on it being this long, but everything's been a bit hectic, as you may have gathered from clues I've dropped throughout this video. But yeah, thank you for all the people who've messaged me to see if I'm ever coming back, and to all the people I've bumped into in the real world, which has been a shockingly high number of people for someone with an audience as modest as mine. If you want to see me in the real world soon, I'm going to Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo, so look for the guy with the big head and the even bigger hair. I'm about to fly off to Japan for 2 weeks, so I won't be able to cover the first 2 episodes of the next season on this channel. I hope when I come back I'll be able to, because I'd love to get back into the routine of discussing these episodes as they come out, and also just discussing other things on this channel. In September I'm starting a new career that is going to require a lot of my time and a little bit more of a restraint with my online activity, so I may still be able to come on here and talk about things, I just won't be able to swear quite so much. And incidentally, that's the reason that you might have a bit more trouble finding the previous videos on this channel. They are findable, but I just need to edit them a little bit to make sure that they are appropriate before they are made public. So yeah, I hope to continue seeing you here. I hope I'm able to talk about Star Wars and movies and all these things, because this is something I really, really enjoy, and I really appreciated the support from the last nearly 5 years of this channel. And your messages and your comments of support have really, I guess, encouraged me to keep at this and keep putting myself out there like this, because it's hard to talk about this stuff, unscripted, semi-unscripted, and it's a vulnerable thing to do, and you guys have made me feel really welcome on this site. So hopefully I'm saying this to anyone who's still watching, because I know a year with no uploads is quite severe. So yeah, I hope I see you very soon. Love you lots. Fire engine. Do you ever dream of being a fire engine?